Hey everybody, my name is Andrew McCormick and I teach middle school art here in Cedar Falls, Iowa. When I say middle school, it's 8th and ninth graders. And I want to talk a little bit today about some of my approaches to art education and some of the things that I've done. Specifically, I want to talk about how I incorporate visual culture arts education or just visual culture into what I do. I've been doing this for incorporating visual culture into what I do for the last 3 or 4 years. I think, our students, they see artwork, but more than that, they see the rest of the world, the rest of their visual and imagery-based landscape. So they are looking at websites, ads, video game designs, TV shows, Netflix, movies, all of that stuff. And what visual culture studies and visual culture arts education tries to do is incorporate a more critical and long and deep look at that stuff, the stuff that makes up our visual landscape, and talk about how those things construct meaning. So big topic issues, big ideas like identity, race, power, war, dreams, all of these things will be represented, supported, debunked in the imagery that our students are consuming. So to me, it makes sense. Why not bring that stuff into what we are talking about? So as I've gone to infusing some visual culture into what I do, I have left the more traditional model behind that I used to do in my art classrooms, which is let's look at a famous artist, here's what they did, let's do something similar. Now, I still do that a little bit, but I do it a whole lot less. There's whole projects that I don't do it at all. I don't bring up a contemporary or historical artist. I just jump right into let's look at concept art based around these video games and how does that tie into something else. My favorite strategy, though, is to do a little bit of the best of both worlds. I know it's a good lesson when I can tie in a historical artist, a historical perspective, a contemporary artist, and then also some visual culture stuff that the students might be looking at anyway. It's a great hook for what the students are interested in, and it's a great way to get buy-in and motivation. So, I think as kind of describing how I do this, I've talked a little bit about the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, but the one thing that I know, the advantages, the motivation, the interest, when you can show them, look at these illustrations that come from a movie storyboard or fashion advertisements, or look at this video game, or, whatever the students are into, you have an immediate hook. The kids are instantly there. Versus if you show them artwork created by, I always say this, a dead white European male 200 years ago, there's a level of disconnect or, a blandness that the students find that if you're using a visual culture as a hook, you just don't have that. Now, there are, I think, some disadvantages. One is you can't do everything, right? So if you're doing a lot of visual culture-based arts education, you might be losing some of that historical context and perspective. And I know that I have, but I try to bring it in, and like I said, a good lesson is going to have all three of those things: historical artists, contemporary artists, so that students know that art isn't something done by dead people, that there's living people not much older than them in the grand scheme of things making artwork, and then also the visual culture, things from their landscape that's around them. So one of the ways that I've incorporated visual culture arts education into what I do is I'm mindful at the very beginning when I think of new projects to do. What are the skills that I want them to learn? And what's a really fresh and interesting way that would use some visual culture or some media that they're already looking at that would get them interested in it? I mean, it's a little bit of a trickeration or a little rope-a-dope to get them interested in what we're doing. Here's something you're already into, and here's how it applies to this other thing. I've kind of finagled them into being interested in something that I'm interested in. But when I adopted visual culture as arts education, one of the things I had to do is I had to change, what I was looking at. But I also did, I had to release a little bit of control over the PowerPoints and presentations and demonstrations that I was doing. Probably less the demonstrations and more the historical exemplars and here's great artists that are doing stuff. And instead, I gave them some big ideas, some concept, and I let them look at people that they were, interested in. So students were naturally gravitating towards the websites, the artists, the design, the media, the genre, the discipline, the subculture that they were interested in to find examples of these big ideas. The app that I use that I really love for this is Padlet. It's kind of a group crowdsourcing way to stockpile images and imagery and research. And that's been really excellent to get the kids looking at more than just artists, but also what's around them in their everyday visual world. So the way to incorporate visual culture arts education is you just have to be very perceptive. You have to listen to your students, know what they're interested in, and also don't take for granted what you're interested in, that those might relate to the students' interests. So for example, I was doing a project on graphic design where we were redesigning cards. So I know that kids kind of like playing card games, whether it's Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic. I know that because my own kids like it. I kind of play with my kids. I know the rules of some of those games. So, and I was into them as a kid too. So I know that there's something there as far as design. But rather than just saying, okay, let's remake a Magic card, I said, let's make a card that doesn't exist yet. So what are some things that you're interested in? And when you ask a kid, they'll always say, I don't know. Like, you must be the boringest kid in the world that you don't have any interest. And when I say, I'm talking books, comic books, TV shows, video games, movies, things on Netflix, what do you like to do in your spare time, skateboard and other activities, then they can start to make a list. And I said, okay, well, right here. Here's a cool cartoon show on Cartoon Network that you said you like. I know for a fact that there's no card game out there that exists like that. So why don't we use that as a jumping off point for you to design this card? Now, I don't really care what the subject matter is, a cartoon show, a video game, a movie. What I care about is their design skills, and they're interested in this thing that they're interested in. So I was able to show them, here's a movie that I like, Pacific Rim. It's got monsters and robots and all of that. I did a little research. There's really not a card game that exists out there. So I could make that. I could use some of my design skills and kind of make this product. And I think the students then were able to realize, oh, so my own interests in comic books, video games, movies, TV shows, those can be the jumping off points for making artwork. Now that's a pretty lighthearted one. It's kind of like, what are you interested in? And the kids answer. Now you could also go a more heavy subject. So I, at the end of this last semester, did a project based on race. This was in the wake of the Ferguson debacle and also what was happening in Baltimore. And I said, look at the media, look at what and how this is being depicted. And let's talk about these issues. And we talked about it, and we looked at artists that dealt with race. And I said, I want you to show me artists who deal with race. And not a single one of my students showed me a traditional artist. They showed me graphic designers, posters, internet memes, things that were making their way around on Twitter. And to them, that was a more relevant world than, okay, here is this blue chip artist who shows in galleries and museums and they deal with race. And if you didn't allow them to find that and express that, you'd be kind of taking out a chunk of their world and saying that's not legitimate to think about. So when you adopt visual culture arts education, you're legitimizing and empowering students to talk about and appropriate images from their own world. And it's just been a real big boon to what I do. So, all right, I hope you get into it. I hope you test it out. Feel free to if you have any questions on it, look me up and send me some questions. All right, thanks.